I'm on. Welcome to the last sermon of the last day of the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot. It's interesting in doing all this, and that is the fact that I'm trying to do the math in my head. From 66 to 22. That's 34 plus 22 makes it, what, 56 Feast of Tabernacles that I've gone through. My mom and them, she's one ahead of me at 57.
Wow.
I attended for 2 days one year. I don't count that. I only count when I actually started full-time keeping the Feast of Tabernacles. And I've never missed one since. Been all over this country. I mean all over this country. We've gone to the Feast of Tabernacles in Lake Tahoe in California. We've gone to the Feast of Tabernacles up at Lake of the Ozarks and stayed in a cabin. We've gone to, let's see, we did more indoor. Before that, after that, basically we did by tent. I don't know how many years we kept the Feast of Tabernacles in a tent. That's the experience. That's the experience we all need to have.
True.
It's a different experience. Now this year I'm staying in a motel. Could care less. I'd prefer to be out here in the cabin, but I'm in a motel. This may or may not be Mom's last feast, or mine, either way, because I'm 75, I got a health problem. Mom's 96, and so you just never know how things are going to go. But we stayed in a condo in Florida on the beach. Let's see, I'm trying to think of where else, other places we stayed. Now, Mom and Dad, they went to other beach sites that I never got to go to. Because there were years that when we were, my family, since Betty and I and the kids were at one beach site, Mom and Dad was at another beach site. They've been in Indiana, North Carolina. So, there was a lot going on out there for beach sites. In the Worldwide Church of God, you had to make an application if you wanted to go to any beach site that the congregation was not assigned to. In Big Sandy, my first year to keep the full feast was worldwide. And the congregation had our own camping area at that feast. And it was laid out by the deacons that came out. The men were coerced into showing up at least 1 week before the Feast of Tabernacles to go through the entire campground and to remove all of the fallen tree limbs and everything else, because this was in a pine tree nursery. That's where it was at. And they had cut streets into it, and then they had cut down trees to let you park and to put up your tent. We've gone through a feast where the daytime high was 95 to 105. And then at night, it only dropped down into the 80s. You're in a tent, you have no air conditioning, you have no fan other than what you can fan yourself with. And that was one of the years that we had finally reached a point where we had cots to sleep on instead of sleeping on the ground. And I had this nice foam mattress to go over 2 cots, so we'd have a nice full-size bed, And but laying there on that foam, you would lay there on your side, and you'd be fanning and doze off. And when you woke up, you were in a puddle of water. That's how hot it was at night. So you turned over and used that puddle of water to cool down that side of it until you dozed off again. Gone through that, and I've gone through it when up here at, in fact, down here in Texoma, the first year we camped there. We were in a tent, and we were another one of these times where we really had gotten fancy. I had this metal frame air bed, queen size air bed, got you up off the ground, nice and comfortable to sleep on. and was really happy. Because that night, we had an electrical storm. I hadn't seen one like that in 20 or 30 years. Lightning just popping everywhere. You could watch it out. You could see the lightning bolts through the cloth of the tent. That's how bright it was. But you had that. We'd taken down our tent when it was sleeting. That's how cold it was. So you go through all of these things. But it's I guess you could say in some cases it's character building. In reality, it is character building. We went one year where the first time we tent camped after we got married. And first night, poured down rain. Brand new tent, leaked it ever seen. So everything we had inside of that tent was soaking wet, including us. So we couldn't even go to service the next morning because we didn't have dry clothes. We had to wait till that evening because the traffic only comes in one way for services, and then it goes out after the last service. Then we had to go into town and go to the laundromat and dry all our clothes out so that we'd have something dry to wear the next day and attend service. We've attended with as many as 16,000 people in a tent. I'm talking about a circus tent that they had put up to do this, set on an asphalt parking lot. And gone through thunderstorms there where they made the announcement, all those got your kids down on pallets on the ground, get them up because water just entered the north end of the tent and is flowing through. And you put your feet up on the back of the bar on the chairs in front of you as you watch the water run under your feet. I mean, these are things that happen. These are things that people that were keeping the feast and enjoying the feast. I mean, later on, you can talk about it. You can, like I'm talking about now, and other people go, well, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be out there and I don't have to deal with bugs, and I don't want to have to deal with this. What do you think the children of Israel dealt with when they were in the wilderness? Now, I want to also say, for those that may have not heard me say it before, but the word wilderness in Hebrew, right out there is wilderness. Doesn't mean it's treeless and desert. It's just an area that there is no human habitation, no towns, no farms, no nothing. So when they were out in the wilderness, they had everything else around them. I mean, they had the manna, but they also had the area around them. Let's see, I'm trying to think of something else there. But anyway, it's been a very interesting life for me. I hope this feast has been well for you. We've been up here for 14 years. We were in Texoma for 8 years before that. Before that, we were with another group down in Florida. It just got to be where 700 miles is just a long ways to drive for the Feast of Tabernacles. So, I guess the one that's come the furthest is, that's right, Barry. From the Netherlands, but in the States, I qualify that. Niels would probably come the closest to being the furthest away. He comes in from South Carolina. Do you know of anybody else that comes in any further, or anybody here that's any further? And so, you know, it's been an interesting life. Church, with you all stand up. Those who can. That's all right. Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, speak to Aaron and his sons, and saying, this is how you shall bless the children of Israel. You shall tell them, Yahweh bless you and keep you. Yahweh make his face to shine on you and be gracious to you. Yahweh lift up his face toward you and give you peace. So they shall put my name on the children of Israel, and I will bless them. Just a day or so ago, they did the priestly blessing at the Western Wall in Israel. One of the things this year is unusual is that not only are we in alignment calendar-wise with the churches of God, where most of us have been with before, but also with the Jewish calendar this year. So So this is their last great day in Israel. I don't know if that has anything to do with anything else. You may be seated. But, you know, it's interesting. Oh, I'm not a priest. I'm not Aaron. I'm not a descendant of Aaron that I know of. When I did my ancestry, nothing out of the Middle East came up in the ancestry line. Most of it came up in Western Europe, in the Netherlands, Holland, Belgium, or Great Britain, or Ireland. Really, most of it's Ireland because Mama's mother's side were all from Ireland. So that's where I get some of my fieriness, I guess. Oh, but anyway, you know, it's interesting to know where your people came from, but, you know, it doesn't mean that much anyway until Yahweh, Yeshua returns. Numbers 15:37 is a command. And there's a lot of discussion over that. Yahweh spoke to Moses saying, verse 38, speak to the children of Israel and tell them that they should make themselves fringes in the borders. That word borders means edges, not corners, in the edges of their garments throughout their generation, and that they put on the fringe of each a cord of blue, a border of a cord blue, and shall be to you for a fringe. Now here's where its purpose is, that you may look on it and remember all Yahweh's commandments and to do them, and that you don't follow your own heart and your own eyes, after which you used to play the prostitute, so that you may remember, prostitute meaning going after other gods, so that you may remember and do all my commands and be set apart to your Elohim. I am Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. To be your Elohim, I am Yahweh your Elohim. Some have a problem with saying God. I don't. Because God is just a descriptive term, a title. It is not a name, and it has nothing to do other than how do you discern between which God? Because other people have gods too. They're not Yahweh. And that's why he says, your Elohim. It's Elohim. Because they put the suffix on it to tell you whether it's mine, yours, theirs, his, them, all the pronouns. You know, pronouns. In the Hebrew, it's all got pronouns. Okay, Bob, what did you have to say?
All I was going to say is that I want to thank you for saying that. I've kind of been called out at least twice over using a term. It's not a name. It's a term that's current in our vocabulary these days. So that's my 2 cents worth of land. Thank you. I appreciate it.
And when it talks about you should not have those names of gods come out of your mouth, God is not a name. It's a title. So when it's talking about that, it's when you actually use names, and I'll use this because it's in the Bible. Baal.
Right.
That's particular. That is specific. Then you have a problem. And mainly when it talks about it coming out of your mouth, it means it comes out of your mouth when you're worshiping, when you're bowing down to them. Not just because it's a general conversation trying to identify some particular scripture or whatever, or some event. Just the general term of God. It's a descriptive term, just like car is a descriptive term. It has no special meanings. Okay? Well, I've covered some of that, haven't I? Sometimes we get into wrapped up in some things that we tend to overreact in situations. Now we're going to go into what I'm really here to talk about. Leviticus 23, verse 1. This is going to sound repetitious, but we need to go through repetition. It needs to be read. In fact, this is supposed to be read at the feast. Have you ever tried doing that? There are groups that do try to do it during the feast. They'll try to read all 5 books by just taking turns reading until they have accomplished it. And then you have, in Judaism, they have, I'm trying to think of the word now. They have sections that they read. Starting today, they will start in Genesis. Reading every Sabbath, they will read a portion. That's what it is. It's a portion.
The Torah portion.
The Torah portion. It's read. And the funny thing about that is, you know that most of those in Judaism have never read the story of Samson. Don't know nothing about it. Because, see, they only read the Torah portions out of the first 5 books. Samson's not in the first 5 books. It's in Judges. They don't read. They will read what they call the half-Torah. But the half-Torah is only a few verses, maybe out of Judges, maybe out of whatever applies to what is going on in the first 5 books. But that's the extent they read. So they don't know the story. And then I'm sitting here in Hebrew class, and there's an 81-year-old woman sitting there that never heard the story. She was Orthodox Jew. She had never heard the story of Samson. And not heard, I'm trying to think of some of the others that I thought of, that basically every Christian kid has heard in Sunday school, the story. Or they went to vacation Bible school, they would hear the story, among the other things that they read. So they didn't know all of these other things, which I figured to myself is a loss to them, because there are, I guess, lessons to be learned from what went on in that, and showing how someone can be of Yahweh, be chosen of Yahweh, still do things wrong, and then try to correct it at the last moment. Going back to Leviticus 23. So I'm going to go through the entire chapter of 23. Yahweh spoke to Moses in verse 1, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and tell them, the set feast of Yahweh." This is why I'm reading this. Whose feast? It's not Israel. It's not the tribe of Judah. It's not Jews. It's not Judeans. It is the feast of Yahweh. So those who believe in Yahweh, it is incumbent upon them to keep the feast of Yahweh, if they want to follow Yahweh. Which you shall proclaim to be set apart, convocations. Even these are my set feasts. 6 days shall work be done, but on the 7th day is a Sabbath of solemn rest, a holy convocation. You shall do no kind of work. It is a Sabbath to Yahweh in all your dwellings. These are the set feasts of Yahweh, even holy convocation, and you shall proclaim them in their appointed season. They're Moedim, the Moeds, their appointments, that you're supposed to appear before Yahweh. These are the set, verse 5, in the first month, on the 14th day of the month, not in the evening, between the evenings, or between the sunsets, is Yahweh's Passover. It says that. So what's the length of a day? Sunset to sunset, right? So he's making it very clear the time frame that he's talking about to begin with. In the first morning, I'll say on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of without leaven. Not unleavened bread, because the word bread does not appear anywhere in the Hebrew. It's unleavened, without leaven. That applies to anything that can be leavened. Beer, sparkling wine, soda. Realize that is actually leaven? Because see, what does yeast do? It rots. And when it rots, it produces carbon dioxide. What's in that soda? Carbon dioxide. What's in that beer? Carbon dioxide. What's in that sparkling wine? Carbon dioxide. With any of those, you can make leavened bread when you mix it with flour. We used to, what was funny, in one organization, we actually had an unleavened read the recipe book, and the 7-Up cake was one of the recipes. Because you have beer batter biscuits, because it rises, it swells up. Anyway, that's just one of the things there. But it said between the evenings. So from sunset on one to sunset on the other, it has to be completed, which is the 14th day of the first month. So they have to kill the lamb after sunset. And normally it's done in that twilight period before dark. Now when it comes to dressing it out, you ought to try it sometime. But I'm not saying that you have to eat a slaughtered lamb, I should say, a ritually killed sacrifice, which is there are those who will preach that you're required to do it. No, Yahshua is our sacrifice. He is the sacrifice for all sacrifice. If you do that, you're really spitting in his face for doing that ritual. It's not required. So anyway, let's see, I lost my train of thought there. Talks about this, back verse 6 says, 7 days you shall eat unleavened. In the first day you shall have a holy convocation. You shall do no regular work. Now notice, it says no regular work. Notice the wording, no regular work. Whereas in verse 3 it says, you shall do no kind of work. So there is a difference between a high day and a weekly Sabbath. The high days are still called annual Sabbaths, only in the fact that you do no regular work on those days. But the prohibition against baking and boiling is not there. If anybody finds it, let me know. But no boiling and baking, and nothing about carrying a burden. Okay? So that sets the first high day and the last high day of unleavened different from the weekly Sabbath. It sets Pentecost separate. Well, as we go through here, that's what I'm going to read. In the first day you shall have a holy convocation, verse 7, you shall do no regular work. But you shall offer an offering made by fire to Yahweh 7 days. And the 7th day is a holy convocation. You shall do no regular work. Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel and tell them, when you have come into the land which I give you, and shall reap its harvest, then you shall bring the sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest, the baking part, to the priest. And he shall wave the wave sheaf before Yahweh to be accepted for you. On the next day after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. Another Sunday, the first, or what we call Sunday, the first day of the week. I'm going to tell something on David.
You couldn't resist.
Couldn't resist. Yesterday morning, since I was going to be leading the songs, David called me all on Twitter. He said, hey, Dennis, you need to get up there and talk about the wave sheaf offering. And so we started to count. I said, count to where? So, I'll always remember that for David. I mean, he just woke up, and for some reason it was a thought that was still in his mind, and he was thinking that it was the spring feast instead of the fall feast. And that we had not been faithful in telling everybody when the wave sheaf offering was and starting to count Pentecost. That's a long way. Huh? Oh, and so anyway,
I had a dream I missed it.
So, I've gone through things like that before. Something just lodges in your mind, and for the life of you, you grab onto it, and you got to go with it. You got to. There's an urgency to it. And so anyway, I finally calmed him down and reminded him, what time of the year is it? And when does the wave sheet occur? You know, things like that. But you know, even among ourselves, being able to know that information. I mean, it's listed here in the scriptures. How well do you know that thing so that you don't become like David? David, you're going to remember me for a long time.
I was getting my practice in.
So he'll be ready next year.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
He'll be waiting for you next year, Dennis.
So it says here in 12, on the day when you wave the sheaf, you shall offer a male lamb without defect, a year old, for a burnt offering to Yahweh. The meal or flour offering with it shall be 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour mingled with oil. Another, an unleavened cracker. An offering made by fire to Yahweh for a pleasant aroma, and the drink offering with it shall be of wine, the fourth part of a hin. You must not eat bread, or roasted grain, or fresh grain until this self-same day. So you're not eating of the new harvest until this wave sheaf was to be done. Until you have brought the offering of your Elohim. This is the statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings. And you shall count from the next day after the weekly Sabbath, from the day that you brought the wave sheaf offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. This is the count to 50, Pentecost, 50. You count, make sure, even, let's say verse 16, even to the next day after the 7th Sabbath, you shall count 50 days, and you shall offer a new meal offering to Yahweh. Well, I've gone through, I don't know how many different changes as interpretations were made in all of my 50-something years of attending, Sabbath services, attending the high days, everything. Whereas there are those that will count all the way up to that first day of the week, which will Sunday. It'll always be a Sunday. If you talk about 7 Sabbaths passing, and then the day after the 7th Sabbath, that's a Sunday or first day of the week. And but they will count up to that point, and then they'll do it the next day. I never could get it in my mind to lock in correctly. There's groups out there right now that do Pentecost always on a Monday, like we always do it on a Sunday.
The day after the day after.
The day after the day after. Then there are those that don't agree on which Sunday to do it on, which first day of the week to do it on. Our calendar is adjusted to keeping the first day of the week that occurs in the days of unleavened. So, if even with the Passover being on a Sabbath, we will start with a high day and count 7 weeks. The day after Passover, we will do the 7th. Or if the first high day is on the Sabbath, we start with that. There are others that disagree, and they have to have the weekly Sabbath within the days of unleavened bread.
Postponements.
And if they do it that way, there are years they're going to be starting to count the day after the last day of unleavened. So outside of the unleavened. One of the other things, yeah, go ahead, David.
Now you guys see why I was freaking out. I woke up in the sweat, call it dinner.
In this Hebrew class that my wife and I attended for 17 years, we're slow learners. Well, I'm a slow learner. I'm the one that argued the most. Because I found Hebrew to be very twisty. Because there are certain rules that you use according to how the word is spelled. It changes something that appears in most cases to be future tense, but because of this one letter, it makes it a past tense. And I never could figure out what was the justification of that. It's just like people saying that Elohim is plural, which it is, because you have the word El, which is singular. So why use a plural word when you're talking about a singular entity? So that means, well, there's more than one type thing. So anyway, let me go back. Let me get my thought back in here. And one of the things that this teacher, she would go through, and we discussed, whenever it was time for Passover, we discussed about Passover, read the scriptures go with it. When it was the count 50, we went through that. When it was each one of the high days and everything. But one of the things she pointed out was the spring feast, the days of unleavened, is a harvest. It is the barley harvest. Okay? They're not talking about using barley to start. They don't. They use the vernal equinox. But in case you didn't realize it, the Jewish calendar actually uses the vernal equinox, and it uses the conjunction, the dark moon, to start the month. It's when there, as Neil pointed out, there are 4 postponement rules fall in, because they can't let a high day be on a Friday or a Sunday. So they don't have a Sabbath and a Sabbath back to back. You know, it's just too, if you don't have a day of preparation, is their argument. Well, it's not in Scripture. So there's plenty of times that you'll have a high day on a Friday or a high day on a Sunday, back to back. We just recently had one. And naturally, if you count Pentecost the way it's supposed to be counted, you would also have a Sabbath and a Sabbath. A Saturday and a Sunday. Anyway, those can be back to back, so they will move them if there's a possibility. About 4 years ago, they had a problem. Sunset, the conjunction new moon occurred 11 minutes after sunset. And so the first day of the month was there at sunset. But when it came to the days of unleavened, that put the first day on a Friday. Well, if you move the first day to Saturday, the last day was going to be on a Friday. And then you move to Sunday to get it to the Sabbath, but it's still on Sunday. You move it to Monday. So, you know, how far are you going to move something in order for it to... So they solved it real, I guess you could say, rabbinical. It's 22 minutes between Babylon, the Babylonian Talmud, and Jerusalem. So they split the difference and declared the day before. 11 minutes. So I mean, because the sun was going to set in Babylon 11 minutes before it was set in Jerusalem. Along that line. But see, they couldn't harvest, but day of unleavened is a harvest time of the barley. Pentecost is the harvest time for the wheat. And then the fall festival is the harvest time of all the rest. The grapes, the olives, not yet for the nuts, because the nuts don't come up until like November, when there's or this time of the year when there's actually a frost. Before nuts will open up and fall out of their shell naturally. But the point is looking at the fact that these are harvests. Yahshua is the first of the first fruits of those that are resurrected. Okay? That's a harvest. And he talks that there will be another harvest. That'll be the, I do it, I break down on that. With the resurrection of us. Okay? And his return. That leaves then the harvest at the great white throne judgment. So you have 3 harvests there too. I mean, that's just things that lay out and come to mind. You can use it ever how you want to. Let's see, let's get back here. Verse 17, and after you've done this count, verse 17, you shall bring out of your habitations 2 loaves of bread for a wave offering, made of 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour. They shall bake with yeast. Now, wait a minute. This is to be baked with yeast for first fruits to Yahweh. One of the forbidden things is leavened bread or bread baked with yeast could not be offered on the altar. It could not be burnt before Yahweh. You shall present with the bread 7 lambs without defect, a year old, 1 young bull, 2 rams. They shall be a burnt offering to Yahweh with their meal offering and their drink offerings, even an offering made by fire of a sweet aroma to Yahweh. One of the things, there's a lot of arguments over what does this, the 2 loaves of bread represent. Well, it's yeast. It's made with yeast, which represented corruption, sin, things of this nature. Those in the second resurrection have been corrupted. But yet they're presented as an offering before Yahweh. And they are resurrected. That's just one of the things that, my mind, runs across numbers of things that I suddenly hits me sometimes. And wait a minute, could these 2 loaves of bread possibly represent those that are going to be resurrected at the time of Yeshua? Or maybe 1 loaf is for that, and the second loaf is for those that will come up in the white throne judgment. Because they didn't have a perfect life like Yeshua did. So there's no corruption in Yeshua, and it's during the days of unleavened, and it is the wave sheaf offering, and it is the fact that the bread that was offered at that time was unleavened, without blemish, without corruption. Verse 19, you shall offer 1 male goat for a sin offering. So there is a sin offering made with all of these high days. 2 male lambs of a year old for a sacrifice of peace offerings. The priest shall wave them with the bread of the first fruits for a wave offering before Yahweh. With 2 lambs, they shall be holy to Yahweh for the priest. It says, holy to Yahweh for the priest. They were to eat it. One of the things of the priest is why he had to be sanctified, had to be clean, ritually clean, was he used to sit down and to eat of this lamb or of this sacrifice. Until he eats of that sacrifice, Yahweh does not accept it. And as such, whatever is offered for is transferred to the priest, and because he is sanctified and righteous, it doesn't stick. With Yeshua, it stuck. Because he became the sacrifice. It didn't just come on him, it stuck to him. With us, with the high priest, I don't say us, not us. With the high priest, they were just an intermediary for that sin. To remove it from the people, but they did not bear I'll think of it a minute. They did not bear the sin itself. It did not bear down on them. Verse 21, you shall make proclamation on the same day. There shall be a holy convocation to you. You shall do no regular work. This is a statute forever your dwellings throughout your generation. When you reap the harvest of your land, you must not wholly reap into the corners. They say corners. This is that same word again. It's kanaf. Kanaf in Hebrew is outstretched bird wings. The feathers along the bird wings, that's not corners, that's sides. And that's really what the word means. Reach into the corners or into the sides of your field. Because otherwise, the apostles would have been guilty when they walked through this corn and gathered it and ate of it. As long as they were along the sides, they were okay. And when it came to gleaning, for those that were poor, didn't have land, or were poor, like Ruth and her mother Naomi, she went out and gleaned the fields. Let's see, now what's his name? Boaz. He took a shine to her. And then Mama gave her instructions on how she was to carry it a little further. By sneaking in to where they were sleeping in the thing and sleeping at his feet. Which was basically saying, I'm available as a wife, even though she was not an Israelite. Now she is in the lineage of Yeshua.
Right.
She's a great-great-grandmother or whatever of Yeshua. But then Boaz had to do the right things. He was the next line, since her husband had died a natural death. Brother died of natural death, there wasn't anybody else. So Boaz was next of kin because she had land that belonged to her ex-husband. She cannot keep it. It had to go back to the tribe or member of the tribe. And so Boaz he stepped up and said, I'll marry you, but he had a problem. There was one other family member that was ahead of him in the line of accession. And so they had to go to the gate of the city. It had to be presented to this relative. And since he was afraid that his son would lose out someone inherited, he refused her. So what she did is she took the shoe off of him and threw it at him.
Yep.
And that ended his responsibility for her. And then Boaz stepped in and married her. So, I mean, you've got all these things that Yahweh set up to maintain the lineages. She was not, but Boaz was of the right lineage for Yeshua. Let's see. And so, how she supported her and her mama until Boaz stepped in was that she was gleaning his field, following his ones that were reaping. Whatever fell on the ground, she was to pick it up. That's like when you have a garden or you have a field. You do not pick up anything you drop. That's the instruction. Do not pick it up. That's for the gleaners, or that's for the wildlife, I should say, to eat. Verse 22, when you reap the harvest, let's see, wait a minute, I already got that. 23, Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel, saying, in the 7th month, on the 1st day of the month, shall be a solemn rest to you, a memorial of blowing of trumpets, a holy convocation. You shall do no regular work, and you shall offer an offering made by fire to Yahweh. The other thing here, it says the 7th month, 1st day of the 7th month. You realize that in Yahweh's annual Sabbath calendar, it's only 7 months long. So when people want to talk about and yell about how you had to do this, and how many months had to fall in, and how many you got to have 12 months and all this, Yahweh didn't have 12 months set aside for this. He only had 7 months. All you had to know is when to start the count of the 7th month, at the first month of the year, to get to the 7th month. Because there is nothing else that Yahweh had them observe in 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 for the common calendar. There's 5 months there that Yahweh didn't have anything set aside. A lot of things happened later on, because in the 8th month is when the temple was destroyed both times. But you know, let's see here. Verse 27. However, on the 10th day of the 7th month is the Day of Atonement. And some have a problem with that. I can't fast. I can't give up food and water 24 hours. Wait a minute. Yeshua, of course, fasted for 40 days and 40 nights. Moses did. Elijah, when he was on the run, was also fasting. So you know, you can do it. In fact, when you do it, one of the things, if you're really relaxed about it, when you reach sundown, you have really no more thought of water or food. So some people say it's easier to do a second and third day. Once you get past that first day, then it's easier to do a second and third day. In one group we were involved with, the minister of the group always left before atonement to go to the feast. They would take a family holiday ahead of the feast. Only for the people to learn later that no, he had never done a fasting for 24 hours. Couldn't do it. Adult man couldn't do it. So, you know, you run into things like this with individuals. Let's see here. Some will latch on to the fact that it says to afflict yourself. Verse 29 says, for whoever it is who shall not deny himself or afflict himself, in that self-same day shall be cut off from his people. That usually means when he's cut off, that by the following year, you're no longer among the living. So, you know, which is worse? Suffering a little bit for 24 hours, or having Yahweh declare you son non grata. I just realized something else I didn't take the place. That's why I keep listening. I have a dental plate. It says here in verse 30, whoever it is who does any kind of work. This is where one high day is different from all of the others. Any kind of work in that self-same day, that person I will destroy from among his people. Well, what work would you need to do if you're not fixing any food? Not eating 24 hours? You don't have anything else to do except come and sit in services. You shall do no kind of work. It is a statute forever throughout your generation in all your dwelling. It shall be a Sabbath of solemn rest to you. It's actually the word Sabbath twice. And solemn rest is also the word Sabbaton. And you shall deny yourselves. In the 9th day of the month at evening, from evening to evening, you shall keep your Sabbath. Well, this is talking about the 10th day. So if you're talking about evening to evening, you're talking about sunset to sunset. So every time you see the word evening in the King James or any of the Bible, it is from the word in Hebrew that means sunset, Erev. Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel and say, on the 15th day of this month, 7th month, is the Feast of Tents, for 7 days to Yahweh. Wait a minute. I thought we were at Sukkot. I thought we were at the Feast of Tents. This is the 8th day. What happened? Did we forget to stop yesterday? No, that's only the 7 days where they were required to be in tents. Then there's a whole, the first day shall be a holy convocation. You shall do, again, no regular work. 7 days you shall offer an offering made by fire to Yahweh. And you shall offer an offering made by fire. It is a solemn assembly. You shall do no regular work. It doesn't say no work, it says no regular work. Verse 37, these are the appointed feasts of Yahweh, which you shall proclaim to be holy, or set apart convocations, gatherings. to offer an offering by fire to Yahweh, a burnt offering and a flour offering, a sacrifice and drink offerings, each on its own day. In addition to the Sabbaths of Yahweh, that means the 52 weeks before. Yes, David?
Do you have verse 36? Because 36 talks about the 8th day.
I thought that's what you read.
You said the 7th day, but then you went to verse 37.
Well, 36 says 7 days you shall offer an offering made by fire to Yahweh. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, the next part.
And on the 8th.
And you shall offer an offering.
Yeah, you missed it on the 8th day.
Let me check some here, because it's not in my printout here. Okay, going back to Leviticus 23 in the Bible, verse 36. Huh, for some reason it did not pick up
Yep.
when I copied and pasted. Okay, I'll read verse 36. 7 days shall you offer an offering made by fire unto Yahweh. On the 8th day shall be a holy convocation unto you, and you shall offer an offering made by fire unto Yahweh. It is a solemn assembly, and you shall do no servile work, or in this case, regular work therein. Verse 37, these are the appointed feasts of Yahweh, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocation, to offer an offering by fire, made by fire to Yahweh, a burnt offering and a flour offering, a sacrifice and drink offerings, each on its own day. Verse 38, in addition to the Sabbaths of Yahweh, the weekly Sabbath, and in addition to your gifts, and in addition to all your vows, and in addition to all your freewill offering, which you give to Yahweh. Not just tithes, these are additional offerings. Verse 39, so on the 15th day of the 7th month, when you have gathered in the fruits of the land, you shall keep the feast of Yahweh 7 days. On the first day shall be a solemn assembly, and on the 8th day shall be a solemn rest. The 8 days are all together, but only 7 of them are declared as Sukkot, or feasting, or staying in tents. Verse 40, you shall take on the first day of the fruit of goodly trees, is what we had, those palm leaves, branches of palm trees, and boughs of thick trees, and willows of the brook, and you shall rejoice before Yahweh your Elohim 7 days. You shall keep it as a feast of Yahweh 7 days in the year. It is a statute forever throughout your generation. You shall keep it in the 7th month. You shall dwell in temporary shelters for 7 days, all who are native born in Israel, and shall dwell in temporary shelters. Meaning they had homes, when you think about it, there were people that lived in Jerusalem. So they didn't have to put up, they didn't have to move out in their minds, but they still, even today, they build booths out on the patio, patios of the apartment, and they go out there to eat their meals during the days of unleavened, during the Feast of Tabernacles. There's even some, I knew a Messianic rabbi that basically their group went to a state park there in Bond, Texas, and they would keep the feast there, which was unusual for the Messianic groups even. It says here, verse 43, that your generations may know that I made the children of Israel to dwell in temporary shelters when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am Yahweh your Elohim. Moses declared to the children of Israel the appointed feast of Yahweh. I went through this because I have an interesting part here in that. Turn with me to John 7, verse 2. John 7, verse 2. Now the feast of the Judeans, and I use the term Judeans because that's what the Greek word actually means. It doesn't mean Jew because there was no such title then. It's Judeans. It's for people that lived in the area of Judea and Benjamin. It said, now the feast of the Judeans, the feast of booths, was at hand. Wow. Here it is in the New Testament, and yet nobody keeps them in the Christian world. Dropping down to verse 37 of John 7. Now on the last and greatest day of the feast. So we're at the greatest day of the feast. Yeshua stood and cried out, "If anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink." We're not talking about literal water. We're talking about a spiritual water from the mouth of Yahweh, Yeshua. Verse 38, "He who believes in me, as the scripture has said, from within will flow rivers of living water." But he said this about the Spirit, which those believing in him were to receive. They were to receive the set-apart Spirit on Pentecost. For the set-apart Spirit was not yet given, because Yeshua wasn't yet glorified. He had not completed his task. Yes, many of the multitude, therefore, when they heard these words, said, "This is truly the prophet." Others said, "This is the anointed one." But some said, "What does the anointed one come out of Galilee?" Where does it say that the appointed ones come out of Galilee? I use the appointed one because the word Christos or Christ is the same word that the Hebrew uses as Mashiach, and both of them mean the anointed one. It's again another term that upsets people, but it can be, come out of Galilee. Verse 42, "Hasn't the scripture said that the anointed one comes of the offspring of David, and from Bethlehem, the village where David was?" Well, where was he born? Okay. So there arose a division in the multitude because of him. And some of them would have arrested him, but no one laid hands on him. He was giving them misinformation. He was not telling the truth as far as some were concerned, because they had a different understanding of what was going on. Verse 45, "The officer therefore came to the chief priests of the Pharisees, and they said to him," they said to the officers, "Why didn't you bring him?" The officers answered, "No man ever spoke like this man with such authority." The Pharisees therefore answered them, "You aren't also led astray," meaning you actually agree with him? You're following his conspiracy? Okay? Let's see. This printer printed this stuff, expanded. Verse 48, "Have any of the rulers believed in him or of the Pharisees? But this multitude that doesn't know the law is accursed." Nicodemus, and who is Nicodemus? "He came to him by night, being one of them, said to them, Does our law judge a man unless it first hears from him personally and knows what he does? Let him talk." They answered him, "Are you also from Galilee? Search and see that no prophet has risen out of Galilee." Wait a minute, you're part of this conspiracy? Just because you question how we're dealing with this? Yes, Chris.
Sorry, but it doesn't say that one would not rise out of Galilee.
Yeah,
It just was silent about that where a prophet would rise.
he wasn't supposed to have any authority. He wasn't supposed to be of the right
Coming out of Galilee,
living party.
coming out of Galilee, that would put him on the proverbial wrong side of the tracks, if you will.
Yeah.
On the redneck side of the traffic, if you will.
Yeah. Well, after they had this discussion, verse 53, everyone went to his own house. I'm going to go back and read a commentary on this, John 7:37. "In the last day, the great day of the feast." This is what the commentary says. "That is of tabernacles, as it appears from John 7:2, which was usually called the feast, the Hag, as Hebrew for feast. In distinction from the Passover and Pentecost, and the eighth day of it was called the last day of the feast, Hareglet Aharon. I think so. I didn't have a vowel point, so I have a hard time with it. The last day of the feast is here, and it was a great day, being, as it is said in Leviticus 23:36, a holy convocation, a solemn assembly, in which no servile work was done, in which an offering was made by fire unto Yahweh according to the traditions of the Judeans, fewer sacrifices were offered on this day than on the rest. For on the first day they offered 13 bullocks. You'll find that over Numbers. And then they took one out each day. So it was 13, 12, 11, 10. So that the seventh day there was but 7 offered, and on the 8th day, 1. When the priests returned to their lots, as with other feasts, but notwithstanding, the Judeans made out this to be the greater day for them, since the 70 bullocks offered in the other 7 days were for the 70 nations of the world, but the 1 bullock on the 8th day was peculiarly for the people of Israel. Are they sure? Or was that for the Messiah? That's my point. And besides, they observed that there were several things peculiar to this on this day, as different from the rest, as the casting of lots. These are things they did. The benediction by itself, a feast by itself, an offering by itself, a song by itself, and a blessing by itself. And on this day, they had also the ceremony. Now here's the other one. I know there's Messianic groups that do this also on the last day of the feast. Of the drawing and pouring out water, attended with usual rejoicings as on other days, the account of which is this. The pouring out of water was after this manner. A golden pot, which held 3 logs, which is like 3 quarts, was tilled out of the Siloam spring, or pool. And when they came to the water gate, they blew their trumpets and shouted, and blew. Then a priest went up by the ascent of the altar, and turned to the left hand where were 2 silver basins, that on the west side was filled with water, that on the east with wine. He poured the basin of water into that wine, and that wine into that other basin of water. At which time there were great rejoicing, piping and dancing by the most religious and sober people among the Judeans, insomuch that it was said that he had never saw the rejoicing of the place of drawing of water, never saw any rejoicing in his life. And this ceremony, they say, is a tradition of Moses from Mount Sinai, and refers to some secret and mysterious things. Yet they plainly say that it was respect to the pouring forth of the set apart Spirit. One of the rabbis, leaders, talks about why is its name called the place of drawing water, because from thence they draw the Holy Spirit. And it is said, and you shall draw water with joy out of the wells of salvation. That's found in Isaiah 12, verse 3. Moreover, it was on this day that they prayed for the rains for the year ensuing, it is asked. Yeah, because this is the time of the year that they plow and plant the barley and the wheat. And you need rain for that to sprout and to grow. And so that was part, I guess you could say, the, now I get the correct word. I'll go on with this commentary. From what time do they make mention of the powers of the rains, which descend by the power of Elohim? Another rabbi says, from the first good day of the Feast of Tabernacles, from the last good day of the feast, they do not pray for rain, but near the rains. That is the time of rains, in which one of their commentators says is the 8th day of the Feast of Tabernacles, for from the Feast of Tabernacles thenceforth is the time of rains. The Judeans have a notion that in this feast the rains of the ensuing year were fixed. Hence they say that at the Feast of Tabernacles judgment is made concerning the waters, the rain. Or a decree or determination is made concerning them by Elohim, upon which the Gemara has these words. I don't go with that. But Yahshua stood and cried. He now stood up, whereas at other times he used to sit, and people spoke with a loud voice, both to show their fervor and earnestness, and that all might hear. I'm not going to go into this about what he meant by those that thirst to come to him. We all know ourselves that the thirst is to come to the knowledge of Yeshua. He will quench everything. He will take care of you. He made the ultimate sacrifice. Let's see. How much time I got on that?
15.
15 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I've been going faster than I thought I would. Curtis,
Yes, we can answer this Pharisees' question in John 7:48 straight out of Scripture. Well, has any of the Pharisees or any of the highfalutin teachers believed him? Let's try John 3 verse 2.
John 3 verse,
Yeah, the first two verses.
first two verses of John 3.
1 and 2.
Okay? John 3. There was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Judeans. The same came to Yeshua by night and said to him, Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher come from Elohim,
That's it, right there. We know you're a teacher from Elohim.
for no man can do these miracles that you have done, except Elohim be with him.
They knew it. And
And Yeshua answered and said to them, Verily, verily, I say unto you, except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of Elohim. And then Nicodemus said unto him, How can a man be born when he is old? Can he enter the second time into his mother's womb and be born? That was a misunderstanding of what he meant by being born again. And Yeshua answered, Verily, verily, I say unto you, except a man be born of water and of the Spirit, he cannot enter into the kingdom of Elohim. That which is born of the flesh is flesh. You're already flesh. And that which is born of the Spirit is spirit. You need to be born of the Spirit. Marvel not that I said unto you, you must be born again. The wind blows where it lists, wherever it's going to go, and you bear the sound thereof, but cannot tell whence it comes and whither it goes. So is everyone that is born of the Spirit.
now try Acts 15:5.
Acts 15:5. Acts 15:5. Then it goes too far. Acts 15:5. But there rose up certain of the sect of the Pharisees which believed, saying that it was needful to circumcise them and to command them to keep the law of Moses. And the apostles and elders came together to consider this matter. And when there had been much disputing, Peter rose and said unto them, Men and brethren, you know that a good while ago Elohim made choice among us that the Gentiles by mouth should hear the word of the gospel and believe. And Elohim, which knows the hearts, bears them witness, giving them the set-apart spirit, even as he did us. In other words, these Gentiles in order to receive the set-apart spirit, and put no difference between us and them, purifying their hearts by faith. Now therefore, why tempt you Elohim to put a yoke upon the neck of the disciples, which neither our fathers nor we were able to bear? But we believe that through the grace of Adonai, our Master Yeshua, the anointing, we shall be saved, even as they were, and even as they. Being all the multitude kept silence and gave adherence to Barnabas and Paul, declaring what miracles and wonders Elohim had wrought among the Gentiles by them. And after they had held their peace, James answered, saying, Men and brethren, hearken unto me. Simeon hath declared how the Elohim at the first did visit the Gentiles, to take out of them a people for his name. And to this agree the words of the prophets, as it is written. After this I will return and will build again the tabernacle of David, which is fallen down, and I will build up again the ruins thereof.
and I will set it up. What, that the residue of men might seek after the master, and all the Gentiles upon whom my name is called, said the master, who does all these things. Known unto Elohim are all his works from the beginning of the world. Wherefore my sentence is, that we trouble not them which from among the Gentiles are turned to Elohim, but that we write unto them that they abstain, and this is what they put on the Gentiles, that they abstain from pollution of idols, and from fornication, and from things strange, and from blood. For Moses of old time hath in every city them that preach him, being read in the synagogues every Sabbath day. In other words, we're going to require circumcision. But see, circumcision was for land inheritance. So it wasn't necessary. Even today, it's not necessary. Yes?
But the key is in verse 5. But some of the sects of the Pharisees who believed. Yes, the answer to our question was, yes, there were some in their own ranks who did believe.
Yeah, well, see, that's the thing you have even today.
It was less than an honest question.
Yeah, it was less than an honest question. It was also, there's always those that are trying to subvert by drawing up things, and you got to do this. It's like this individual I was talking about who convinced a group down in Florida that they have to kill a goat on Passover in order to fulfill the command to have the Passover. Now in Irving, I guess we come close, but we don't kill a goat. In the past, I've gone out and bought 4 or 5 boneless leg of lamb from New Zealand. And before the Passover service, I would put them in the smoker and cook them, roasted by fire, as instructed. Basically, all I did there was I put olive oil on the outside, sprinkled some sea salt, and then sprinkled some ground up rosemary. Now I'll tell you what, that's as the saying goes, to die for. I'll put it this way: there's nothing ever left over, and it's the only way I will eat lamb. I don't like the taste of lamb, but we would do that, and then we do a herb. So it says herbs, and what we do there is we get these leaf lettuces, you know, the arugula and all those types of leaf lettuces, and we make a salad. We have unleavened bread, and we have a meal, and that's the meal. When we finish that meal, we then do the foot washing and the rest of the service. We do not have wine at the meal. It's not, they had wine, but Yahshua was using it because it's not part of the Passover. You go back to the study on the original Passover in Egypt, wine is not mentioned. Wine is used in sacrifices. I believe that the reason there was wine at the table on Yeshua's night was he was to be the sacrifice. So you have the lamb, the unleavened bread, and the wine. It's all part of the sacrifice of Yahweh. That was for him. So, let's see. Where am I in this thing? Okay, here's something interesting that came up in the commentaries. A commentary said, as the first Redeemer caused a well to spring up, so the last Redeemer shall cause waters to spring up, according to Joel. Joel 3:17. So you will know that I am Yahweh, your Elohim, dwelling in Zion, my holy mountain. Then Jerusalem will be holy, and no strangers will pass through her anymore. So in that future date, in that end time, once Yahweh establishes himself, not ever Tom, Dick, and Harry can pass through. You will have to be a believer. You will have to be someone that is part of what is going on. It will happen in the day, verse 18, that the mountains will drop down sweet wine, the hills will flow with milk, all the brooks of Jerusalem will flow with waters, and a fountain will flow out from Yahweh's house and will water the valley of Shittim. Remember the Mount Olives is split to the north and south, and then a stream of water, healing waters will flow east and west. One will go into the Dead Sea and heal the Dead Sea, so there's no longer a Dead Sea of life, and the other one will go towards the Mediterranean. Verse 20, but Judah will be inhabited forever, and Jerusalem from generation to generation. Oh, wait a minute, I missed the verse. Verse 19, Egypt will be a desolation. So, I mean, at the end times, Egypt is going to be a desolation, and Edom will be a desolate wilderness for the violence done to the children of Judah, because they have shed innocent blood in their land. But Judah will be inhabited forever, and Jerusalem from generation to generation. I will cleanse their blood, that I have not cleansed, for Yahweh dwells in Zion. And it shall come to pass in that day, when basically the commentary is, when the Antichrist shall be destroyed, the Judeans converted, the power of righteousness revived, and the presence of Elohim among his people enjoyed. It says here, the mountains shall drop down new wine, that which, for the following expressions, are to be understood not in a strict literal sense, as one of the rabbi writers seems to have understood it, who says that in the millennium, Elohim will cause a rain of blessing to descend morning and evening. The earth shall bring forth all kinds of fruit without labor of man. Honey shall drop from the rocks, and the fountains of milk and wine shall overflow. But hyperbole, just as the land of Canaan is said to flow with milk and honey, not that it really did, but the phrase is used to denote the fertility of it and the abundance of temporal blessings in it. The literal sense is this, that the mountains shall be covered with vines on which they are often planted. These vines shall be full of large clusters of grapes, and these grapes, being pressed, shall yield a large quantity of new wine, and so by metronome, whatever that means. The mountains are said to drop it down, and that is, abound with it, or produce an abundance of it. But the spiritual or mystical sense is that the churches of Messiah in those times comparable to mountains, and so the hills, he goes into a whole lot of other things there at that point. One of the things that I learned while I was in Israel is that most of their watermelon and cantaloupe comes from this mountain range that runs up the middle of the country, from just north of Jerusalem all the way up to, okay, and that's where they raise their watermelons and their cantaloupe, because of the fact of the breeze coming in off the Mediterranean and going upslope. There's a dew, a heavy dew every night, so they don't have to do any watering, and so everything grows fantastically in that area. Let's see. I should get this down to the last few verses. Minute and a half? Okay, let's go. Zephaniah 1:12. It will happen at that time that I will search Jerusalem with lamps, and I will punish the men who are settled in their dregs, who say in their heart, Yahweh will not do any good, neither will he do evil. Their wealth will become a plunder, and their houses a desolation. Yes, they will build houses, but won't inhabit them. They will plant vineyards, but won't drink their wine. The great day of Yahweh is near. It is near and hurries greatly. The voice of the day of Yahweh, the mighty man cries bitterly. That day is a day of wrath, a day of distress and anguish, a day of trouble and ruin, a day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and blackness, a day of the trumpet and alarm against the fortified cities and against the high battlement. I will bring distress on men, that they will walk like blind men, because they have sinned against Yahweh, and their blood will be poured out like dust, and their flesh like dung. Neither their silver nor their gold will be able to deliver them in the day of Yahweh's wrath, but the whole land will be devoured by the fire of his jealousy. For he will make an end, yes, a terrible end, of all those who dwell in the land. I'll give you the references here. Jude 1:6, Revelation 6:17, for the great day of wrath is come, and it shall be able to stand. And Revelation 16:14, for they are the spirits of devils working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth, of the whole earth, to gather them to battle of that great day of Elohim Almighty. Hallelujah, praise Yahweh.
Hallelujah.